Oregon's offseason and Big Ten expectations. So Oregon right now has the number 3 transfer portal class. They have the number 5 overall recruiting and transfer portal combined class in all of college football. They have lost a couple of one coach. I'm trying to find it here. I just had it up. I apologize. There we go. They did lose Demetrius Martin, their cornerbacks coach, but they did bring in, I think his name is Chris Hampton, to be his replacement. However, we don't see very much turnover on Oregon. So Oregon had a good year last year, not very much turnover on their coaching staff, but they have added a number of good transfers. Jabari Muhammad from Washington is coming in there. Cam Alexander, a cornerback, is coming in there. Evan Stewart, 5-star in the transfer portal, was a really, really good wide receiver for Texas A&M. There's just a lot of good players coming in to Oregon now this year, and we could see Oregon coming in and fighting for the Big Ten championship right away. T-Sol, we'll start with you. What has been Oregon's most impressive move, whether it be player, coach, whatever it might be? What's been their most impressive move to you so far this offseason?
It's got to be joining the conference of the Big Ten. I mean, let's be serious. The Pac-12 was not a legit conference. They're going to be taken a lot more serious in the Big Ten. And so coming out as a 10-win team in the Big Ten, you're going to have a lot more respect than coming out as a 10-win team in the Pac-12. That's what it is for me, but they got to be ready for the knit and grit of the tough teams, because, you look at your schedule, you might be playing Minnesota and say, hey, that's not a tough game. Well, guess what? They're going to play it tough, so you better be ready.
Big Ten tough. Justin, what do you think?
Yeah, for me, it's got to be. So you talked about the turnover at the cornerback coach position, but it's the cornerbacks in general, specifically Jabbar Muhammad, because that was not only their biggest issue coming into the 2023 season was their pass defense, but it was also their biggest issue in 2020. It was 2022 and then 2023. Now, it did improve, coming into the 2023 season, it was the biggest concern, and they were previously 110th in terms of pass defense. Overall, defensively this past year, they were 11th in scoring, 11th in run defense, but 63rd in pass defense. And so they had some turnover there. Last year, they had brought in Tysheem Johnson, who was added from Ole Miss the season before. He will be returning. And then, they, Evan Williams, who they also added before the 23 season, he's out, but they got, like I said, Jabbar Muhammad, Cam Alexander, who's going to come in and probably replace Jaleel Florence, who's dealing with a off-season knee injury. So he'll probably come down there and he'll probably play safety. And then you have, I'm drawing a blank on his name. Box safety, Brandon Johnson from Duke. He's probably going to come and be either a box safety style of guy. But I think they've done a really, really good job, especially the Jabbar Muhammad. That was so huge for them in that defensive backfield, especially with Jaleel Florence being out and that secondary being a little bit hamstrung. But yeah, this is going to be massive for them. That's the one thing that they really need to get better to make this team complete, and they addressed it. So.
Especially, from a rival, Washington, right? Getting a guy like that. We just had Eric from the Ohio podcast saying he doesn't want any of his rival players, but in this situation, that was what Oregon needed, and
got to do it. Yeah,
it has to make their rival sting a little bit. You got their players, so.
Exactly.
B-Sol, what has you've been your favorite addition for Oregon so far this offseason?
I mean, I agree. They addressed a lot of needs that they had, but Oregon's biggest loss this season or this offseason is, aside from the potential of Daniel Lanning leaving, and, they're counting their blessings that he didn't, but it's the fact that Bo Nix is gone after 2 stellar years there, and they replaced Bo Nix with Dillon Gabriel, who's coming in with a ton of experience, a ton of success at the college football level. And he's a guy who, again, probably not as accurate as Bo Nix, but when Bo Nix transferred out of Auburn, he wasn't the most accurate quarterback either. So it comes down to, can Oregon put Dillon Gabriel in a position to be successful like Bo Nix was? And how much of a drop-off does that offense have going from Nix to Gabriel? Because I don't think it's going to be that big a drop-off. And especially when you start looking at that Oregon schedule to start the season, you're talking they go Hawaii, Idaho, Boise State. 3 games to really give Dillon Gabriel enough time to get right, get his head in the game. And then you've got, your in-state rival Oregon State all before you start Big Ten play. So Dillon Gabriel has that opportunity to win over the fan base there and show them, hey, Bo may be gone, but I've still got this team clicking on all cylinders.
I was told by some Oregon people that apparently that Hawaii game was canceled for some reason. So I don't know what the deal with that was, but so they're not playing Hawaii, apparently, according to Oregon Twitter. But I agree. What'd you say? Idaho, and who was the other one?
Idaho, Boise State, and then Oregon State after. And Oregon State just lost DJ as well. So
right. Who's going to be a tougher opponent, Boise State or Oregon State? I mean, I know Oregon State fans are like yelling at their computer having me ask that, but
I would still have to go with Oregon State, maybe. Just I think maybe they just have a higher quality of talent recruited to that team just because, they're Oregon State, Boise State.
Maybe.
Statue of Liberty is their only moment. Completely honest.
And it was a moment. I think for me personally, it's along the same lines as you, B-Soul. Bo Nix, I think, was much, much more important to this Oregon team than I think some people realize, and bringing in a veteran like Dillon Gabriel for that is huge. The wide receiver, Evan Stewart, to combine with Gabriel, I think is also another huge addition. And I've been high on him this entire time. I understand not everybody else is as excited about him because of how his first year in college went, but I think Dante Moore to Oregon is a really, really good pickup. Unless something happens with the NCAA rules, he's not going to be able to transfer unless he graduates. So they have their new quarterback after Dillon Gabriel locked in there. He can't say, oh, this isn't for me or whatever else and transfer out. They could bring in another transfer quarterback next offseason and say, hey, you two battle it out and let's see who the best player is, Dante Moore or, whoever this other guy is. So I think it's a good move. I think that Oregon has set themselves up. They've kind of given themselves this identity that, hey, if you're a transfer quarterback, come to Oregon, we'll turn you into a 1st or 2nd round pick with Bo Nix. And if they can do the same thing with Dillon Gabriel, they're only going to improve that stock and make themselves a more desirable place for quarterbacks at struggling programs to come and excel there. All right, Justin, we'll move on to the next question with this. Your expectations for Oregon coming into the Big Ten. I think everybody kind of feels like Washington's going to be a little down. They've lost some guys. USC is a bit of a question mark without Caleb Williams. We know they're going to have a good offense. What's the new defensive coordinator going to do? People are kind of down on UCLA, but Oregon seems to be the best team coming into the conference right now. Justin, what are your expectations for them in 2024?
Yeah, I definitely, naturally, probably everybody's going to say that they're the best team coming in now. I firmly believe that they are not in a position yet. So here's my thing on the whole conference movement, Pac-12 to Big Ten. I may have told you this before, and I've said this numerous times, but if we're using the national championship game as a gauge of what the top of each conference looks like and which conference is going to have to adjust more to the other, I don't necessarily think the Pac-12 teams are built for this battle of attrition that is the game in the trenches that is the Big Ten football. I think they even in, if you use a one-off example of them playing a Big Ten team, the grind of the season and being in here with these dog fights with your Michigans, your Iowas and all that takes a toll. That causes, that wears a team down. They're used to this spread it out style of Pac-12 football where it's more so getting guys into space and you don't have the same wear and tear on your body in the battle of attrition over the course of the season. I think that's going to impact them. I don't think they're going to win the Big Ten, nor do I think they're going to be in a position to win the Big Ten when this season's over. But I can see them finishing, top 3. I'll probably say top 3. I'll go top 3. I'll give them that. But I just think there's going to be a bigger of adjustment than a lot of people think with some of these teams. And I think in the beginning, it's going to be a little bit tougher than they think coming in. Maybe they'll drop a game or two that they shouldn't, but that's my take on it overall. I think they will be very good for the conference long term, but I just think there's some some size that these teams are going to have to build up a little bit, and some adjustments that are going to have to be made to the style.
Would you say that of all the Pac-12 teams, and I'm just pushing back a little bit here for conversation, wouldn't you say that the best situation of those 4 teams is Oregon, though?
Exactly. And so that's why, like, I can't really say, that's the only reason why I can't really put them past 3, but I can't also pick them to win at year 1. I think 3 is about a reasonable spot for them to finish in if everything goes the way that I think it might.
Yeah. Your thoughts, B-Soul, on the expectations of Oregon going into 2024?
Yeah, I think Justin hit again was pretty spot on with that. Speaking from experience and coming from the Big 12 to the Big 10 was different for Nebraska, just like Oregon coming from the Pac-12 to the Big 10. It's going to be different for them. I'm not trying to say it's going to be the exact same adjustment there, but coming from the Big 12, and again, when you watch that year 1, Nebraska the first year was kind of able to, I'll say, make some of the Big 10 teams adjust to them a little bit, but then they learned very quickly, if you're not winning the trenches, you're not going to be winning in the Big 10, especially come, end of October, November, December. And so when you look at it that way for this Oregon team, I think probably that 3 to 4, like top 3, top 4 team in the Big 10 is realistic there. But as much as this pains me to say it, is their top, like they have Ohio State at home in Eugene, and then they go from that game, which Ohio State's going to be a dogfight for them, to on the road at Purdue end of October, which very realistically, that has an opportunity to be, there could be snow, it could be brutally cold, it could be stupidly hot. It's so hard to say, and Purdue's not necessarily the best team.
When is their bye week? Just while you're looking at them.
They are.
That's a curious to know where that comes at in the season. What point?
They got a bye week after Wisconsin, which is the second to last season.
Very end.
But I think there's 2 bye weeks this year.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
They got one after Oregon State too.
Yeah, so
early
it's right before
and
Big Ten
end.
play, and at the end,
not helpful.
I didn't do them any favors either.
No, but I could just see that, as much as Purdue's usually a trap game for some teams, if that is your first true road game in the Big Ten, it's October in West Lafayette. There's an opportunity there that's where Oregon's going to stumble, and that's where their season could really get put on the ropes.
Yeah, I'm doing some quick math here on Nebraska entering the Big Ten their first season. So, T-Soul, you go ahead and give your expectations while I finish this up.
Well, I definitely think Oregon's good enough to compete for the Big Ten, but I think they're just going to run out of steam. I mean, realistically, that Ohio State game, I think, is going to be deflating for them. I could see them being undefeated heading into that Ohio State game, and after that, I could see them losing, all but 2 of their games to end the season. I mean, I think November's going to kill them. You're talking at Michigan, home against Maryland, at Wisconsin, home against Washington. That's pretty tough November.
Let's remember Scott Frost too. Was saying that the Big Ten was going to have to adjust to his offense, and it did not have to.
Yeah.
So
I got Oregon finishing. I'm not even ready to sell the ship yet on Washington. I still think Washington's going to be better than them at the end of the season, and I don't think that necessarily they're going to be better than Penn State or maybe even Wisconsin. I'm not sure. Maybe Nebraska. If Raiola shows up this year.
Whew.
Raiola's going to be wheeling and dealing all over him.
Oh, you betcha.
I do think I probably am going to favor Oregon over Washington, but I also did that twice last year, and look how that went out for me. So I thought they were going to beat them twice, both times last year.
Yeah, I stopped betting for a reason.
Yeah.
I was betting too much on Nebraska.
Same.
So in 2011, Nebraska's first 7 games, which they lost one of those, but they went 6-1 in their first 7 games. They scored an average of 37.5 points per game, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
In their last 5, which they lost, how many of those? Because they went 9-4 in their last 5, not including the bowl game. I guess if you included the bowl game, it would be even worse though. So, but in their last 5, they went 3-2, and they went 20.6 points per game.
Yeah.
So the running out of steam, at least for the offense here that you guys are talking about, definitely can hit. My biggest thing is I'm wondering if Oregon is going to be more affected by the possibility of recruiting changes and how they're going to have to adjust to that, being in the Big Ten, because anytime you join a new conference, there's recruiting changes there. All of you guys can attest to that. And it's like maybe this is going to be their best year as they adjust to that. We'll see. We'll see what happens.
I think that
It
recruiting
looks like an Oregon fan. Let me do this really fast, Justin.
Oh, yeah,
Looks like
yeah.
we have an Oregon fan who's upset with us. This is
No, of course
hilarious.
he is.
Last year's pass schedule was
that.
harder
Dude's delusional.
than this year's.
They're all mad.
Big. I do think that the pack schedule, like top end, was more difficult than some Big Ten schedules, but I still think at the end of the day.
But it's not about that. It's about the overall, the snowball effect of the grind of the cold and the Big Ten schools and the way Big Ten football is just winning the battle of the trenches. It's just hard-nosed physical football. Even Rutgers, they're one of the most physical teams. They're probably the most physical team out of the Pac-12 teams, Rutgers.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm not counting Oregon out by any means. I think you guys are a bit lower than them I personally am. But I definitely see where you guys are coming from. Like I said, with coming to the end of the season, holding up and stuff like that. Because let's be honest, November is a grind for everybody. That's the reason why the SEC has gotten rid of one of their conference games, so that way they can play a cupcake, whatever. But that's one of the reasons why they do that, is because November is a grind for everybody. And it is true that coming into the Big Ten, you're going to have the grind of the cold in a lot of areas. But let's also not act like Oregon doesn't deal with the cold. They're cold up there.
Right. But that's
well.
That's why we specifically were talking about a little bit more of the other stuff on top of that.
I think also, with that being said, as much as I think the offense will be affected by the tone of the game and how Big Ten football teams dictate how the game script goes, I think it's more going to affect the Oregon defense in the long run. That come the fourth quarter, especially you're talking let's call it your fourth, fifth Big Ten game in a row, where you're playing these teams who line up and want to run the ball at you in the trenches, up the middle, in between the tackles, the entire game. And they're used to having teams who want to spread you out and play in space, that your offensive line or your defensive line is not going to be built to sustain that in the long run. That again, I keep going back to that Purdue game, and I hate, trying to call that as an upset of the year right there. But I think that's going to be a game Purdue is going to try and run the ball, dictate, control the clock, take as many opportunities away from Oregon as they can. And by that fourth quarter, again, Oregon coming off a long game they've got Michigan State, then Ohio State back to back, and then they go on the road to Purdue. At that point, you're talking, that's quarter number 12 of Big Ten football. That how does their defensive line react to being just ran at the entire game?
Yeah, and I mean, it's going to be interesting to see. So I know any Oregon fan watching this, you have probably either pulled your hair out or turned it off by now, and that's totally fine. We get that. The only thing I would argue is that we have three guys who have all seen what happens when you join a new conference.
Yeah.
And we'll all admit that there are different styles to different conferences, and they do change, and they do affect you. So I think Oregon is a very talented team. I think that, like I said, when we were talking beforehand, they're still my second favorite currently to win the Big Ten. But if, like you guys are saying, if they start struggling toward the end of the year, whether that be defense or offense, it would not necessarily surprise me, because like I said, it's November, it's cold, it's tough to play in, and it's the grind of trying to make it to the playoffs.
And there's a little bit of pressure on these teams innately to prove themselves as the teams coming into the new conference too. So how do they handle that pressure? If they do slip a game here that they shouldn't, and the narrative starts to flip, do they panic? There's a lot of angles to this, a lot of nuance to it. So
Needless to say, Oregon has the opportunity, though, to come into this conference
Shut us
and
up.
just receive all bragging rights.
Just win. Shut us up.
If they come in and they win this conference, guys, we have nothing to talk about.
I'm a
We have
man of
no
reason,
beef.
dude. I will
Yeah.
praise them if they come in and do that. I'll be like, I was wrong, dude.
And we'll say Oregon's the one. But like I said, if any of these 4 teams coming in have the chance to do it, it's Oregon, because I think Dan Lanning has focused on that defensive line, and he has focused on the line of scrimmage more than some other of those 4 teams coming in have done. So we'll see what goes on with Oregon in the future. Thanks for listening to the Big Ten Huddle. Please do like and subscribe. We appreciate that. If this was your first time listening, we are the Big Ten Huddle. We cover all things Big Ten football and basketball. We have a long episode every Sunday, Tuesday, and Wednesday night, all at 9 o'clock. So come in, check us out, get in the chat, let us know what you're thinking. We would love to have you join us and learn more about the Big Ten.